Hello and welcome back to Kidocracy at Large. I'm Siddhan Chandra and here every Saturday to look at current events through the lens of Kidocracy. Kidocracy calls for the rule of minors and minorities, and kidocratic education is led by minors and minorities, aimed at adults and the majority. And it educates through movements and collective action mainly, as with Black Lives Matter, Idle No More, Occupy, Arab Spring, and Fridays for Future. But also through individuals blowing the whistle on oppressive practices within powerful institutions. Harry and Meghan's interview on Oprah, for example, is something I had parsed last week through the lens of the first three values of kidocratic education. And today I'll be addressing it through values 4 to 6. Value number 4, minoritarianism and base materialism. Value number 5, flight from molar to molecular. And value number 6, sovereignty versus mastery. So how does the value or the overlapping values of minoritarianism and base materialism influence our view of Harry and Meghan's escape from the institution of British monarchy? Minoritarianism, or becoming minor, is a philosophical concept developed by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari. Becoming minor is a process of affiliating oneself with entities that are weaker than oneself, and it is primarily a mode of action to avoid becoming fascist. Harry's deep affiliation with his biracial wife and biracial children led to him fleeing the comfort zone of being a prince towards becoming a refugee of sorts, despite his wealth. Base materialism overlaps with minoritarianism. How? When affiliating with entities weaker than oneself, one is necessarily falling from the height of human consciousness, idealized by religious authorities as divine, towards the basely material bodies of our own, as well as other humans and animals and plants, as well as the substrate of base matter that holds and nourishes all of us, the earth. The head lords it over the body, just as man does over the rest of nature. The grandiosity of human exceptionalism has led to endless abuse of weaker humans, as with women, children, working class, other minorities, but also of animals and nature itself, which has resulted in our current climate bankruptcy and escalating human conflict. So both minoritarianism and base materialism involve embracing and affiliating with base matter. A quick example is the children's fight for the planet. Fridays for Future brought out millions of people out to the street in support of 1 million species at risk of extinction, demanding a major sea change in how we live. Another example is Pakistani men walking in support of, walking with the women in Aurat March, the Women's March. There is the Greek myth of Daphne turning into a laurel tree. George Bataille formulated base materialism in order to topple Hegelian idealism that is inherent in bourgeois culture. The ideal human form, as expressed in European bourgeois art and architecture, places at the other extreme and denies the formlessness of nature and places non-white bodies, laboring bodies, be they human or animal, in a continuum towards base matter. If you think idealism as a good thing and materialism as bad, you are repeating the lessons taught by the Christian priests who polarized matter and spirit, man and woman, soul and body, God and universe. British bourgeois society, all the way down to the tabloid reading right-wing underclass, is shored up by the lifestyles, the idealized lifestyle of British royals, while being kept real by the tabloid press. British royals maintain their celebrity status by tightly curating their forms of presentation, with a little help, with a little editing from the tabloid press. So British royal form does not allow for a black princess or her biracial children. Despite her beauty and abilities, Meghan is seen as formless, as tainted by labor, descending from grandparents who engaged with base matter, like all working class people do. Harry and Meghan's flight from the lily-white British monarchy to the black celebrity class in the US, who after all got where they did through their own efforts, is an example of minoritarianism and base materialism. On to the fifth value, flight from molar to molecular. Deleuze and Guattari used the measurement units in atomic physics, moles and molecules, moles being aggregates of molecules, as a metaphor for individuals and groups. Flight from molar to molecular means that we behave more independently as individuals than as members of groups. We are more independent at a molecular level to engage with other molecular entities than when we are a part of a group identity, be it a state or race or religion or family. The American draft dodgers, for example, who refused to fight in the American army, are disengaging at a molar level from the American state and affiliating at a molecular level to foreign people affected by the wars that the American state fights. So briefly put, Harry fled the molar entity of the British royalty to honor the molecular connections with Meghan. But zooming in, we see a more complex interplay of both molar and molecular tendencies in what transpired. They initially connected on a molecular level as individuals through curiosity and interest. But through their marriage, they were absorbed into the molar entity of the British royal family as a linchpin of the British national identity. Then it was seen as a modernizing influence on the monarchy. Meghan was good PR for a royal family presiding over a multicultural Britain. But apparently, Britain is not multicultural enough. for this molar aggregation to work. So Meghan and Harry splintered away, moved to the US, and came out on Oprah, an institution, a molar entity. Not to mention the US itself as a molar entity, of which Meghan is an empowered citizen. This molar aggregation seems to be working better because of how Black Lives Matter, its re-eruption, how it affected the molar entity of the American state with an influence on the elections. Black Lives Matter itself was a movement based on molecular connections impacting the state, a molar entity. So you might say, how is it that this rich couple, married couple, forming a molar entity of a family, joining the American celebrity class, how could we say that there's a flight to the molecular there? I think it is in the case of Harry, who fled a lifetime job as a royal, his country, and antagonized his birth family, is definitely flying towards the molecular. Their flight from molar to molecular is asymmetrical and on a spectrum. It is not absolute. On to value number 6, sovereignty versus mastery. Just as Bataille dismantled Hegelian idealism through base materialism, his concept of sovereignty is a rebuttal of Hegelian mastery, as articulated in the Hegelian master-slave dialectic. At the core of Bataille's concept of sovereignty is Nietzsche's declaration that virtue is a personal choice. In Antichrist, Nietzsche announces splendidly, a virtue must be our own invention, our most necessary self-expression and self-defense. Any other kind of virtue is merely a danger. Nietzschean virtue demands a non-compliance with Protestant moral imperatives of impersonal virtue and duty. The fundamental laws of self-preservation and growth demand the opposite, that everyone invent his own virtue, his own categorical imperative. And he further affirms that virtue should be based in pleasure, since an action demanded by the instinct of life is proved to be right by the pleasure that accompanies it. Affirming pleasure over duty, Nietzsche brings our bodies back into the realm of conscious ethical action. There was no pleasure in the dutiful silence demanded of Meghan. It went against the instinct of life, made her suicidal. Her rejection of the seen but not heard role in the royal family is an expression of Meghan's sovereignty, in contrast with the monumental mastery of the Queen herself performing her role. More comparably, Harry and Meghan display their sovereignty in sheer contrast with the mastery of Kate and William, seamlessly blending with their institutional roles. Kate and William embody the mastery of working royals, carrying on gracefully despite media insults, being dependable, shoring up the hierarchies of the British class system, looking good, and making the British people look good. Harry and Meghan rejected that mastery because they were authentic. It was not enough to just look good, you had to feel good. They expressed their difficult emotions. Well, mastery is all about maintaining conventional utilitarian economies. Sovereignty points to its disruption. Sovereignty and mastery overlap with the dichotomy, the Nietzschean dichotomy, of the Apollonian and the Dionysian registers of experience. While Apollo is the god of rational thinking, knowledge, and order, Dionysus is the god of wine and dance, emotions and instincts. For Nietzsche, there needs to be both. According to his reading, European cultures jettisoned the Dionysian and became exclusively Apollonian. And this has led to the unhealthy conditions that we are in today. This unhealthy culture has globalized because of colonialism and capitalism. Globally, adult supremacy, which we all embody in varying degrees, looks down upon emotions. As when Greta Thunberg was vilified for crying, "How dare you?" So this asymmetry is something we all have to address in ourselves as well as the world at large. Next week, I will be looking at Harry and Meghan's insurrection in the light of the last 3 values of kidocratic education. Till then,